Hey, you are listening to Real Talk with me, Ali, and her, Avril, on the Post-Burnout Growth podcast. And today's topic for you is all about the role of habits in burnout, in either preventing burnout, but also when you are in post-burnout recovery. So, habits, Avril.
Hello. First of all, hello, Ali, and hello to all of our listeners. Ali's having a laugh and a giggle, and I will in a bit as well because we seem to we're going for all of the big topics, but more to the point, we are picking conversations that we want to have with each other and also with you in terms of those foundations and those building blocks that you can start to put into place if you are already noticing you are on a journey of burnout, and or if you are already there, then what does it take? What will you need? What are the reserves of energy that you've got to start to build new habits as you come through burnout recovery and into post burnout growth? We
Mm.
do love these big topics, don't we, Ali? As we, we talk
Yeah,
about burnout, that wasn't
we
enough.
we just go, okay, what are we going to chat about today then? Oh yeah, let's just chat about this. Not that I profess to be an expert, in the world of the definition of expert, but definitely got some stories to tell, haven't we?
We definitely do. We also wanted to approach this conversation from the point of view of really coming at this from a place of compassion, coming at this from a place of very much from a place of curiosity. Because from a place of curiosity, we can become present to what is, the habits we have, what's working, what's not working, rather than coming at it from the language of judgment. So sometimes we'll say good habits or bad habits. So we'll attempt and do our best as we talk through this in terms of using more neutral language, but also inviting you to think about habits as something you do, something that has potentially served you. It serves a need, it meets something within us, but also in the world outside. And so yeah, so to kick us off, Ali, um, how, what would be a good starting point in terms of the role of habits with burnout? What would you
Yeah,
say?
I guess, for folks listening, there's a lot of things that could come up just hearing the word habits, but I guess for me, it's talking about habits being important in terms of being a strong foundation for us to stay balanced, to stay resilient, energized, and really, I guess, support our sustainable long-term success without tipping into
Mm,
that burnout phase or down that burnout path. So that's really when I think about habits, is what habits daily can really just uphold our well-being. It
mm,
doesn't have to be with burnout in mind, because undoubtedly any habits that uphold our well-being is going to be good for every aspect of well-being. But I think that being more mindful of the need for perhaps, a couple of really key habits that, just kind of keep you in a good space, if you want to
mm.
call it that. Not making it overly difficult for yourself or rigid, but just some habits that are supportive, I guess, in short. And I think also, actually, one thing that's a little bit of a bugbear, hope it doesn't feel like too much of a tangent. And I think the theme has come up in a few of our different discussions, is we talked about this always on when we talked about overwhelm.
Hmm.
Um, And there's just this sense of, we've been living in a world, especially if we think about the business, corporate world and the like, of productivity equaling self-worth, equaling
Mm,
value as a human being. And that can be a big factor when it comes to not just burnout, but also when it comes to buying into the need for good habits and upholding those good habits by way
mm.
of loving, protecting, honoring yourself, and really just looking after yourself, so that you can show up in life the way that you want to. So I think there's this thing of always on, that some of these habits might get in the way of being always on, and we might therefore reluctantly buy into them, which brings us back to some things you've spoken about in some of our other sessions, is around knowing your why around the
Yeah.
habit is really vital. Rather than, well, absolutely, we know we should eat green vegetables, or we know we should eat fruit and veg because it's good for us, but that doesn't mean we're going to do it. That doesn't
Mm,
mean that we want to do it. That doesn't mean we enjoy doing it, right?
yeah.
So it's that buy-in to having habits. And the bugbear that I didn't quite articulate there, perhaps, that I was trying to get across, is the always on thing. We have to fundamentally accept that we are not robots, we are not machines, we are not fueled by one source of energy like a computer or like a fridge,
Mm,
that runs on electricity, for example. We are fueled by four different types of energy, which I've mentioned in previous discussions, which is our physical energy, our mental energy, our emotional energy, and our spiritual energy. And the physical energy to show up in life is absolutely vital. But we kind of forget that we really need to, and this probably brings me to the first habit, we really need to build daily throughout the day and the week solid, solid recovery habits, because we cannot run like machines on and on and on and on and on without stopping. And this, when you're in a fast paced, high demand corporate environment, you can be guilted into taking a break that involves some kind of recovery. But you have to accept fundamentally, we are not designed as humans. Our human design is not to run and run and run, or work and work and work. Our human design is to work and rest, work and rest. So, in a sort of pulsating fashion, if you think about your heartbeat, it's not one continuous beat. It's beat, rest,
mm,
beat, rest, beat, rest, beat, rest. Athletes know that their, sustainable performance and their high performance is because of high quality rest, but also their ability to recover well and recover faster. So I think that's one of the fundamental things when I think about burnout, when I think about habits, and I think about this always on, the overwhelm, some of the things we've spoken about,
mm.
boundaries, with self boundaries with others in other podcast discussions, that we must accept our human design to work and rest. So a recovery habit is probably number one for me.
That's amazing. I'm really glad you talked about and touched on the topic of rest, because it's one of those, gosh, that's one of my bugbears. I think this in this always on hustle all the time to get to your goals, this idea that rest is lazy and that rest is earned at the end of all of your best
Ooh,
energy
earned. It's the
is
fact that you said
just
earned,
earned.
earned. I'm sorry for interrupting you, but I have to say earned. Like
Ah,
we have to earn the
yes.
rest. No.
And we have to earn that rest by just, giving of everything of ourselves. And then when we've accomplished this big goal after all of the stress and um all of the supposed praise and recognition of accomplishment, then we might be able to power down and rest. And I think you've touched on such a powerful topic and theme there around quality of rest. And that should probably be one of our upcoming episodes. Makes a note. But I wanted to sort of use that as a segue into something that came up for me a lot in my own journey of recovery, was around habits. The creation of new habits is sort of is the way that flows from behavior, that flows from identity. And as I was moving through burnout, and in essence, what is at the heart of our conversations towards post-burnout growth, there's a new identity that's sort of forming and taking hold. And as we shed the layers and shed some patterns and shed, these old shaky foundations and start to really take hold of the new sustainable ones, looking at habits as those this tiny little bricks and the tiny little things that come together to become behavior that roll up into identity. So for instance, for me, when I'm thinking about habits with myself, but also when I do this work with the people I work with clients, is um I am someone who rests, not I am someone who has to take something off a list and then I've done rest or I've done self-care, I've done. So looking at habits is really the end, this outcome, flowing from this new identity. What have I learned from my experience of burnout? What is it that I'm going to bring into this future that will lead to sustainable, I heard you use the word success, as we're
Mm,
accomplishing our goals. What are the habits that really honor my intrinsic self-worth? Self-worth is again not something that's earned. Self-worth is, we all have it. It just is within us. It's
mm,
not traded in, as in terms of our productivity and the results we deliver to the top line or bottom line of the organizations we work for. Um,
mm,
so I really, this sense of from this new identity of that's taking shape, what are the behaviors and therefore what are the habits in the moment, in the hour, in the day, in the week that
mm,
reinforce to myself, first of all, that I am this person who does this thing. I am someone who exercises, but what does that habit look like? Do I actually have my exercise gear out and ready to go? Am I setting myself up for success with this habit in the first place? So, for instance, with me, I've had to develop certain new habits around food and dietary things because the experience of burnout left me with certain chronic health conditions. But what that's meant is I can't, it hasn't been an experience of I think, oh, today I won't eat all of these things because I've got to eat all of these other healthy things. So this can't be something that's inside one's head. It has to be real practical things. So for
mm,
instance, if it is, I'm not going to eat anything with white sugar, then, I go into a store and I'm not shopping for the things with white sugar. I am instead shopping for and surrounding myself with the things that I
mm,
need to have or consume. So how do we set ourselves up first of all, for success, in terms of the habits we do have.
mm,
Um, the other thing I was thinking about is that are we doing the things we do because we understand our needs? Or are
mm,
we doing these things because we've always done them? So when we talk about autopilot, default programming, and we're like, this is how things have always been, and I'm just going to keep at these. And so I'm just being cautious of using the language of good habits or bad habits. Often one might find themselves in a position where we do recognize that what we are doing deliberately doesn't serve us. It might be that at the end of the long day, we have a certain habit of reaching for something to soothe ourselves. And we know that doesn't really soothe us. It just gives us that momentary sense, mentally or emotionally, that we've actually dialed down the overwhelm or we've avoided the discomfort, but it's still there. So I think coming into a place of integrity within ourselves to go, hey, what are the things that I do that are not
mm,
serving me? Um, and more so, what are the things I could learn to do or could start doing or continue doing that I
mm,
know will bring me, I know for a fact, and this is my personal example, when I start my day with 30 minutes of quiet time, prayer, and reflection, that is a habit that has served me so well, and I just continue with it. Um, that sets me up for the day. It allows me to come into a place of presence within myself. It allows me to connect with my sense of the divine. So that's a habit that I've started and that I've continued to go with. Another habit that I
mm,
had to learn during burnout recovery was meditation.
mhm,
It was something that was completely new for me. And
mhm,
at first, it started as something I had to do. But I think
mm,
this is what I want to come to as well, that the creation of new habits requires effortful, deliberate choosing. You've got to put some effort in the direction of something. But for me, initially, meditation felt like something I had to do. And now it is, I am the person who does this thing. I am someone who meditates. It's not something I have to take off a list.
mhm,
And I have found my own ways to do that. And then the one last sort of thought I want to just close my sharing out with. Um, was around the piece around compassion. And Ali, you've talked about this so beautifully in so many of our podcast conversations. Sometimes we think when we're starting something, especially starting off a new habit, that if it falls down, it's like, oh my goodness, this has happened. And, and then we beat ourselves up. We might beat ourselves up for it. But it's perfectly okay. And I share this from experience. It's perfectly okay to get back up tomorrow and start over, pick back up. One of the coaching prompts I use with myself is what is the least, the minimum thing that I could do here that will still be a win. That means I've still met this. If I can't meditate for 30 minutes, what does 5 minutes of meditation look like today? What does 10 minutes of, exercising look like? So I think coming at this as well from a place of compassion is a huge piece so that we don't get into a cycle of start, stop, and then it's dropped and we haven't found our way to the habits.
Mm,
I see you
mm.
nodding vigorously. Talk to
Yeah,
me.
it's every time you share something, as well, I'm getting lots of downloads. Um, I guess one of the things that stands out that's relevant to this topic that you've kind of prompted in me is a habit is something that we build over time in order that it becomes a habit, that it becomes automatic. It becomes automatic. It's not automatic instantaneously after
No.
3 times, after 7 times of doing it, etc., etc. And an acceptance around that instead of shooting ourselves or all or
Mm,
nothing thinking, whereby we go, oh, well, I only went to the gym like once this week. What's the point in bothering going again? Like, well, you went 1 time this week. That's great. That's the start. And the other piece that I think is really important that you kind of hinted at as well, was around setting yourself up for success. And for me, it's absolutely been about routines that are the
mm,
pathways to the habit creation. So a really simple one, perhaps not specifically so burnout related, was you mentioned about the fitness habit,
mhm.
and I would put a number of reminders and enablers in place for myself to
Yeah.
ensure that my priority, no matter what else is happening in that day, I go and I move my body for an hour. And that is between, I have my training shoes at the door, like literally at the door. You see them pointing as if they're the invisible man's about to step
Present.
outside. Like they're there. I have my
Yeah.
gym bag with my weight gloves, with my water bottle. I prepare it the night before. Um, so it's in the fridge, it's cold. I see it when I open the fridge in the morning. That's another visual cue for me. I have a
Mm,
diary appointment in my calendar every day, that this is gym time followed by lunch. So I've got the alert that goes off from that. And then in terms of, I mean, for me personally, I've also got somebody that I train with, which helps
mhm.
massively. I do go by myself as well. But those little visual cues and physical reminders,
Yeah.
of making sure my shoes are there before bed, my water bottle's filled up, it's in the fridge cold, ready to take out, my bag's packed. Um, oh yeah, my earphones are charged if I want to be listening to a podcast or some music when I'm in the gym.
Yeah.
That stuff is part of my routine of setting myself up to uphold my habit. That was a bit long-winded, but you kind of hopefully get
That was
that there's
beautiful.
you kind of hopefully get the gist of some of the things that might not appear important actually helping me fulfill the habit and fulfill the commitment that I've made to myself. So I think that when you talked about setting yourself up for success, it's what routines in the way that you structure your day, can actually help you move in the direction of the habit that you're looking to create. And one other thing, just because you mentioned self-compassion, that I think is also really um, a bit of a buddy for self-compassion, is
Yeah.
starting anything new, whether it be boundaries that you're starting to, communicate, whether it be habits that ensure that you have proactive recovery periods and
Hmm.
spaces in your day and in your life in general that you proactively, you know, ring fence so that you can step into those and nurture yourself,
Yeah.
is patience. Patience is a skill that, again, it's not talked about at school. Um, we tend to be mostly impatient.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of setting ourselves up for success and thinking about the proactive, helpful things. But
Mm.
one of the most unhelpful things are our expectations of, this should be a habit already. I should be able to do this. It should look like this. And if it doesn't look like this, I've failed. And I'm going to berate myself for it. But also the patience to wait on the cumulative effect of the seemingly unimportant actions and routines, like laying our stuff out the night before, that support us in fulfilling that habit. And
Yeah.
patience is just one of those that's overlooked, because in this instant culture that we have, we push a button and we have something delivered tomorrow. We hit a few buttons on a phone or on a laptop, and a meal arrives in an hour.
Mm.
We think that things should just happen, click, click,
And
click, now,
yeah.
yesterday. And this can
Yeah.
actually impede us and have us believe, this is a key bit, is have us believe that change isn't possible for us.
Yeah.
Have us believe that habit building is some mystical thing that is reserved for only a few who get up at 5 a.m., like, the 5 a.m. club,
Love.
which,
Yeah.
has its place, right? But it's that expectation, compassion, and couch it with some serious patience. And when I
Yeah.
say that, starting a new habit, do give yourself a couple of months. I mean, and also the other thing is about consistency with habits, is
Mm.
sometimes we're not consistent, but then there's a bit of a debate about this recently, actually, about, well, what is consistency? You get to decide. And that's my stance.
Yeah.
So somebody might say, only went to the gym once last week. Yeah, but you still went to the gym last week. That's consistent. You've went to the
Mm.
gym every week this year. Some weeks you've went to the gym 3 times. Sometimes you went to the gym 1 time. Did it mean you were inconsistent in
Mm.
practicing the habit of exercising and moving your body? Well, you get to decide, actually. You still showed up to exercise. It may not
Mm.
have been 3 times last week, but it was 2 times. And then we get into that space of diminishing our efforts and
Yeah.
being impatient and those expectations. So I think that's where we can very quickly unravel. But when we think
Yeah.
about building proactive habits for ourselves, it is being mindful, and like your mindful practices in the morning, creating that beautiful space to nourish yourself and set yourself up for the day. You don't need to do loads of things. And I think this is one thing I
Mm.
actually want to kind of just make a point on
Yeah.
before kind of, you
Go for it.
know, getting your take on this, is, although I can share lots of ideas, insights, experiences to the cows come home, I'm also really mindful of creating overwhelm in somebody who's already feeling overwhelmed. I'm
Yeah.
also really mindful in making it seem unsurmountable, because it
Mm.
feels like a shopping list, or it feels like another to-do list that I, quite
Mm.
frankly, am not ticking off. And then we use that to feel bad about ourselves. And really, with everything, it could be one habit, just one habit. It could be your recovery habit. It could be your meditation habit. It could be your exercise habit, whatever one you choose, that you make that your one thing. If you
Yeah.
want, go for 3 things, but keeping it super simple, it is always, no matter who you are, is always going to have a higher rate, higher chance of success. And you're going to reap the benefits and the outcomes of that, rather
Yeah.
than trying to do a massive pile on of here's all the well-being things I have to do. Here's all the, self-care things I have to do. And if I don't do these things, I'm failing. Because we're really quick at turning those things around and turning them on ourselves. And
Yeah.
I've been absolutely guilty of that. I don't know, what's your take on that?
Everything you said, my goodness. I'll start with the last thing first, which is this is not a side project, side hustle, or something new to start off in addition to, the thing about burnout recovery, and I want to say this very transparently, if you are already sort of in that place where you notice where there's a lot of overwhelm, surviving on fumes, if to use that language, or just literally completely at the end of all of your physical energy, in that place, my experience was that the only thing to do was the first thing in front of me. And so sometimes it wasn't even, it's not always about starting something new. And that's definitely what this podcast conversation is about. It's about sometimes noticing what is already there and what you can hold on to and continue with that holds you in a good place. And so, to use Ali's language, really beautiful language around proactive recovery, what does that look like for you? Maybe it is taking that walk. Maybe it is waking up first thing in the morning and just literally opening the window and taking a good breath of fresh air. So, there are already things that you do that work well. It is pausing long enough to notice what that is for you and really taking hold of that. I also wanted to touch upon a few things that you shared, Ali, which for some of our listeners who may again be in corporate environments, high pressure, fast-paced growth, where this idea of what you do must generate results like yesterday, or that you've got to keep on a hamster wheel of doing things in order to produce results. And so going back to what you shared around, having patience, giving grace. Sometimes when our ways of working have normalized certain patterns in us, stepping off that or walking a new path and creating new neural pathways in our brain by simply choosing to be patient, to allow that work to work itself out is literally sometimes the work in itself. Um,
Mm.
so while we may be in an autopilot state of rushing through things, holding on to our habits, either starting, stopping, or continuing will require that we are taking a different pace. Um, you also talked about something else that really jumped at me, and it's the thing about comparisonitis. Someone else's 5 a.m. routine does not work for me. Someone else's, so there's no one size fits all, and there shouldn't be because we are such deeply unique and complex and beautiful, weird human beings. But my habits are not Ali's habits. What works for Ali will not work for someone else. So noticing when there's that sense of it's wonderful to observe and learn for sure, but noticing when those shoulds kick in. If someone else is doing something, if they're spending an hour a week or 2 hours a day in the gym, whatever that might be, thinking that you should also act or perform in
Mm.
those ways. So just noticing if there's any comparison. And I think for me, what I noticed was, that, and we do this through coaching. Celebrate the wins, celebrate the small things. Yes, I went out today. Yes, I got my exercise gear ready, to use that example, and I went out for a walk. Or yes, I
Mm.
chose the fruit over the cookie. Whatever is your particular thing that you're building is
Mm.
celebrate the little wins, every win, and celebrate momentum and progress rather than that spiral of self-criticism and of self-shaming. um, I think all of this, because I was just listening to you, Ali, as well. I was reflecting on how all of these things that we do, these habits that we build, the things we hold on to, they're opportunities to get to know ourselves. It really is the
Mm.
gift. Sometimes you start with something. So I'll again come back to the example of meditation.
Mhm.
As someone with a history of complex trauma and with big PTSD, sitting in one place and meditating can be very, very challenging. This is true for many trauma survivors. And I found that it wasn't the habit of meditating that was sitting, it was sitting in one place. But I love a walking meditation. I
Mm.
love meditating while I'm doing the dishes. So finding my own way to have that habit and to enjoy it and build and stack it was the way forward for me. So have a think about, these are all opportunities to get to know yourself. If something isn't working for you, doesn't necessarily automatically mean one isn't good at it or one needs to get yet another mindset shift about it. It just
Mm,
is, what else could I be doing? Um, and I think for me, in terms of just starting to bring this conversation to a close, um, when we keep our habits, and especially in terms of burnout recovery, in terms of moving towards post-burnout growth, I like to think of keeping those habits as sort of keeping promises to oneself. And so every time I'm choosing the 5 minutes of meditation, every time I'm choosing the thing I need to eat, every time I'm choosing proactive recovery and rest,
mhm,
it is that small nudge of keeping a promise to myself. Um,
mm,
and Ali, I know you've used this language in some of our other podcast conversations around reparenting, choosing that inner adult, strengthening that inner adult. And
mm,
so as we start to show up for ourselves, habits are, I like to think of it, the smallest yet really tangible ways in which we show up and keep
mm,
promises to ourselves and build self-trust. So yeah, Ali.
That's beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, wow, you shared lots of um, wonderful things there. And I just, as we come to the close, there's one thing to pick up on that I think is definitely worth another mention is
Go
this
for it.
opportunity to get to know ourselves. And that reminded me of some work that I did, like auditing your habits, which requires self-awareness to even notice, well, what habits are currently in play for me, which
Mm,
ones are working, which ones are not working, and the context of whether they're working or not, or some might say a toxic habit versus a helpful habit, is the toxic
mm,
habit is the habit that's getting in the way from you becoming the person that you want to be, the habit that's getting in the way of you living the life that you want to experience. And so the seemingly harmless habits, you know, can be those that on the surface do appear unhelpful. But for example, if you're constantly wired, if you're constantly overwhelmed all the time, and you spend the day guzzling coffee to keep yourself going, it's arguably a habit that's going to keep you stuck in that cycle. So if you want to get out of that overwhelm and you want to get out of feeling wired, then drinking coffee throughout the day and not drinking any water, not hydrating yourself, that
mm,
group of habits is in opposition to how you've said, well, I really want to just feel relaxed and calm and grounded. And I want to go
mm,
home at night and feel like I've got some energy left for my family or my partner when I go home. But I'm so wired, I can't pay attention even to what my partner's saying. And I have no capacity to take on any new information about what happened for them today. So I feel like I'm not showing up as as the best partner. But then you go back to work the next day and you repeat the cycle of just guzzling coffee, meeting after meeting, and you keep yourself in that state. So there has to be a pattern breaker, there has to be an intercept, which is
mm,
perhaps something that we could talk about that aspect of habit creation next time in
yeah.
another session. But I think this opportunity to get to know yourself that you've said a few times, isn't that worth it? An opportunity
Mm,
to get, this is a beautiful opportunity to get to know yourself, to reconnect with yourself, to lead yourself, to ensure that you are putting your best foot forward because you absolutely deserve that. But the key thing is, we often think that that has to come from outside, and it may sound trite, you
mm,
may have heard it before, but it can come from us. It's about giving ourselves the space, giving ourselves
mm,
the space to slow down, giving ourselves the space and time to recover our energy, giving ourselves the space and time to nourish our energy through that meditation, that beautiful walk that you mentioned. Um, Space and spaces is another big factor in the habit creation for me that I would just really like to leave everyone with as you embark upon this journey to really honor the opportunity to know yourself better is create spaces first and foremost and decide after that how that space might
mm.
best serve you. That's just something I'd like to close with.
That's beautiful, Ali. Thank you for those beautiful words. You've been listening to the Post Burnout Growth podcast, unfiltered in the moment conversations where Ali and I share personal stories of burnout, recovery, and growth to inspire and comfort those of you on a similar path. Please continue to join us to find connection, insight, and renewed resilience. If you've loved listening to our conversation, if anything you've heard today sparked a light bulb or three, we hope you will continue to follow us. So please subscribe or follow. And if you know anyone who would benefit from this conversation, please do feel free to share it with them. Thank you for joining us today. And we will link through to some of our other podcast conversations in the show notes. That's all for me from Avril and from Ali. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.